Right.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the May Knowledge Share, which is looking really popular. We're up to 23 participants at the moment and more arriving. First of all, I would like to thank our sponsor. So Perspective. This knowledge share has been generously sponsored by Perspective Research Services, who specialise in data collection solutions involving qualitative, face-to-face, CATI and online approaches, domestically in the UK and internationally, consumers and B2B. Please feel free to contact Jade On, Commercial Director, for any questions or RFQs. Right. Okay, Kath, over to you. Can I just ask everyone, I think you'd actually want them all, you actually want people to be able to talk, don't you, Kath? So can you all unmute yourselves, please? And if you want to put your cameras on, that would be lovely as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that's brilliant. What a great introduction, Lynn, and thank you for thanking our sponsor as well. So not obviously, but because I'm a qualitative researcher, since lockdown, I've been doing a lot of my research, nearly all of it online. So I know I've got my own views on how to do online groups, but I am not the expert on it by any means. So this is genuinely knowledge share for us all to share with each other. I think we're going to have to speak in headlines and keep it fairly brisk, but this is really about trying to generously share things that work really well and where we think there are pitfalls that people ought to be aware of, to share that as well. We'll obviously, the recording will also be made available. So what I wanted to do was just to put on the screen a kind of subject matter, maybe say a couple of thoughts that I've got, and then open up for conversation. So yeah, please do sort of treat it in the spirit of generosity that always happens with the ICG. So I will just try and find the screen share, screen share there. Okay, and literally it's just one slide that I've got. So the first topic I thought we ought to be talking about is, do we need to, if we're doing online sessions, do we need to treat recruitment differently? I would suggest that from past experience, we do need to recruit people that have got know that they have got good Zoom connections. I think we need to specify to people what our expectations of them are in terms at recruitment of what the Zoom session will be like, and to give them some understanding of what's going to happen, because people intuitively think, I can do this on my phone, I can do this in my car, I can have the kids in the back of the car. And unless we're really clear to people about what our expectations are, like, for example, being in a quiet room, being in a well-lit room, having good internet connection, there's no reason why people are out of order for doing it another way unless we tell them. So those are my first opening thoughts. So yeah, it would be brilliant if people just want to join in now with their thoughts and questions.
Can I jump in, Kath?
Please do.
As a recruiter, yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you want to stop sharing the screen for a minute so we can see faces? Is that all right? Yeah. I mean, oh, hang on. I also missed who I was admitting. Sorry. Well, yes, this is something I've worked out over the years, but if a client doesn't ask all those questions, I ask them anyway. Things like Zoom knowledge, and I've got one client who will say, if you try to join this from a moving vehicle, you will not be paid. Which is quite interesting. And yes, I always say, have you got a device? Have you got certainly a laptop or a PC? And some clients will accept tablets, others won't. So there's a thing there. But yeah, I always screen them really thoroughly, irrespective of whether the clients ask me to or not, to make sure that they can do all that. And I've got quite a long tick list that they have to satisfy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lynn. Any other thoughts or pitfalls or pieces of advice about actually recruitment?
So I think that with the Zoom,
it is really interesting. I think the whole recruitment thing is really interesting because I've definitely started recruiting differently. So you have that thing where you go, okay, so now we can do cross location. So we're not bound, we don't have that boundary of going, I've got to do X number of groups because I've got to have, so sometimes it might be separate in the nations, but you don't have to say, well, I need to have one in Leeds and one in you know, I don't know, Dorset, or one wherever. So you can do that cross thing. So that's really great. But as well, that can also provide a different set of logistical challenges as well. I think, like when you're recruiting and you've got different recruiters all over the place, and then you're trying to pull everything together. So yeah, so I think it's kind of swings and roundabouts, but I definitely think there are some recruitment benefits that we can sell into, and definitely I've had to learn to think differently about recruitment, I think.
Yeah.
On that topic though, Annabelle, it's not great for geographically based recruiters.
No, I know, I see that. I know, I really don't think it is, because I know I'm often coming to you and going, can you find me 2 people that fit into this? And then you're interlocking quotas because you're talking to recruiters that are spread out all over the place, and you're giving them a different. So yeah, that's what I mean. The logistical challenges around that, and also then paying incentives, and you know, it's yeah. So definitely, I think that can be a challenge.
I have to confess, I feel a bit of a heel because I used to go directly to recruiters back in the day when we were doing face-to-face groups. And now I'm afraid I do everything through intermediaries. I know, I'm sorry, Lynn, because, well, a lot of the people I used to work with have stopped doing it, probably because of people like me not using them. So it's a bit of a vicious circle. But actually, just logistically, when, you know, in a given group, I want a person from the north, a person from the Midlands, a person from the south, you know, a person from London. It's just such a pain to actually have to go to people to actually get them together. So I hold up my hands and say, yeah, I know that's not supportive of individual recruiters, but that is a move that I've made in response to the challenges that I face with remote interviewing.
Yeah, I've got a question, which is last year I did some in-store work in Grimsby, and when I was in the store I was also trying to recruit people for online sessions, and I kept on saying to people, you know, 40 quid for chatting to me for 45 minutes on Zoom. So you would kind of think, wow, great money. And people were really kind of anxious. And what I think I worked out by the end of it was that I did get some takers, and they were all people that worked for the council or worked for more middle class jobs. So I really was interested to hear from everybody whether they feel like there's a kind of a lack of diversity. So great, we're getting geographical diversity. Are we losing diversity in that we are getting people who've more managerial class or more working from home type people? Because those Grimsby people, they were like, you could tell they just didn't feel comfortable with Zoom or weren't really used to it, and maybe had used it once in lockdown and hadn't since then. So I was really interested whether anybody else had got that feeling that actually Zoom and or Teams or whatever is a bit more managerial class.
I think it can be, but I think as well as an age thing too. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me all right. I feel like I can't hear myself, but anyway.
Yeah, no, we can hear you.
Sorry. And I found recently it wasn't groups, it was interviews, and it was with tradespeople in construction, and literally none of them wanted anything like Zoom or Teams. They were all phone calls. They were in their cars. They were at home with their kids on their shoulders and stuff. They were just doing what they do every day, in and out, on and off the phone. There was no way I could have got those people in a group, not without literally going and standing in a car park with them, I think. It was, yeah. So I think it really does. I agree. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you too, Linda. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to disagree.
Annabelle?
I'm going to disagree. Like,
Yeah.
I've been constantly surprised, but I think a lot of it is about the recruitment, and it's about the processes, and it's about what you put in place and how you've managed to access those people. So I've just done some research, and I've talked to some really, really isolated Muslim women who barely come out of the house and really, really cautious. But because I went through a Samati like a place, it's a community center, and they was a really trusted person, then she, you know, she kind of got people together, and she did it, and they really trusted her. They were pretty much, they absolutely adored her, and they would pretty much do anything for her. So I think sometimes, and I know really right at the beginning of Zoom, doing the first sort of online project that we did, and we had these discussions with clients about things, you know, these older, very low social class women are not going to want to do it. They're not going to be really uncomfortable with it. And they were absolutely fine. But we spent, you know, a bit of time beforehand going through everything with them, going through the tech with them, doing little run through. So I think it's possible. I just think it's about making sure people are really comfortable and accessing them possibly in a different way.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. I'm really sorry, but if you want to put anything like pressing, useful in the chat, put it in. That would be really helpful. Because I just wanted to ask people to comment on which platform they think is the best in terms of delivering best results for the researcher, all of that kind of stuff. So if you want to comment, if you can put your hand up, then and then we'll take it from there. Best platform for doing research. Graham, and then Maria.
It's no contest in my view at Zoom.
Why?
And actually, it plays a little back to the previous discussion, which is it's also the one that's most user-friendly, easier for people to come to terms with, and therefore it doesn't present a massive challenge to people, even if they're not particularly familiar with video communications. Team gives me nosebleeds, even when I'm using it with clients. It's just so, bad. But yeah, I go for Zoom every time, personally.
Brilliant. Maria?
I have nothing to add. I completely agree with everything Graham said. Anytime I've used any of other platforms, including those that have been, they have an additional moderator offer. It hasn't really added a lot. Zoom, for the main reason that it's just easiest for everybody to use. The other reason I would say, though, just one final additional thought, is that I just find it the most stable. I mean, I've got really good fiber where I live, and it doesn't drop out. I don't fall out. Other people don't. Other people can fall out, but I know that it's a bit contentious for lots of reasons, whether it's GDPR, but Teams bloody nightmare, and other platforms just have been so difficult. So
great. Thank you. I think Alison and then Alan.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm so sorry I was 5 minutes late. I was actually conducting training online, so it's a very it's a common topic for me. So I think I use both Zoom and Teams a lot. I would agree Teams is probably easier for a consumer who's not so used to kind of tech. For business people, I find really both works well. However, I don't know what most of you find, but the challenge if you want to be showing things and sharing your screen, if you're using Teams, that often you then only see one video of the person, whereas in Zoom you can see like 8 at the same time. You can get around that by using Teams with 2 screens. So then, you need your videos of participants are on one and then what you're showing on another. So I think Zoom is probably the easier application, but I find some business people do prefer to use Teams. The other thing is that breakout rooms on on Zoom tends to be much easier as well to manage. I mean, I probably spend about 6, 7, 8 hours a day using Zoom and Teams. I'm an intercultural trainer as well as a moderator, and it works on both, but Zoom is easier for breakout rooms as well. So I guess those two aspects, the videos and the breakout rooms, then Zoom is easier.
Thanks, Alison. Alan?
I would say Teams for business to business. I'm getting a bit of a backlash on a current project, doing some depth interviews with sort of senior procurement directors, and about a third of those aren't allowed to use Zoom anymore. So it's a kind of corporate ruling. If it's consumer work, definitely Zoom. I use a little AI thing, which I don't know whether anybody else uses, called Read AI, which just gives you an engagement score and a little summary, and automatically does sound bites of what it interprets are the most important questions. You can't clip the videos yet, but they are working on that. So I think that is due to come in.
Do you
So
know
for me,
it presumably it is GDPR compliant, is it, Alan? Or
read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You've got to just, you get the person opts in, so there's an
Right.
we're recording this, okay or not, basically. But that's all part of the setup. I think it goes back to your earlier points. You've just got to be creative and really actually a bit more robust, perhaps, with your setup if you want to get mixed groups of, good cross section in your groups, as we were talking previously.
Perfect. Thank you, Becky, and then Anita, and then we'll move on to another topic.
Yeah, thank you. I hope this isn't too sort of off-piste, but I just wondered what people thought about using Zoom. It sounds like Zoom's kind of generally a consensus for ease of use, but using Zoom.
Oh, ironic. Maybe we'll come back to Becky. She's probably unfreeze in a minute.
She's frozen.
Yeah.
Oh.
Anita, you go.
Yeah, just very quickly, just echoing what I think Graham said. It's very user friendly, both from our point of view and the respondent's point of view. We always do a tech check with people beforehand, especially if it's a one-on-one, because we don't want to have the client watching simultaneous translation in place and then everything goes the wrong way. So we'll always do a tech check as well. And the other thing is that simultaneous translation works really well on Zoom, both for our translator, for our clients. It's really easy. The one thing I haven't mastered yet, and I've seen there's been threads about this in the ICG at the moment, as far as I know, Zoom lets you record in one language. So if I'm doing a group in Spanish, I have to choose whether the client listens. It will record the video in Spanish, not with the simultaneous translation over the top. But I think there are ways around that, but I don't know how to do that yet. That was one of the things I was hoping that I might learn today.
Does anybody know the answer to Anita's question? Can you record in both languages? Does anybody know that answer?
I think you have to use two different computers,
right,
two
log
different
in twice.
accounts. Yeah.
Okay, log in differently. That makes sense. Clara's not nodding at that. Becky, you're back with us. Just wondering if you still using...
So don't worry, I've just put a question in the chat. It's
okay, so if people can have a look at the chat and answer, that would be really good. So actually, Anita moved us on really well to set up for success. So how to get the group going so that it works well. So Anita mentioned a tech check. So some recruiters ask people to come 10 minutes early. They pop them in out of the waiting room into the room. They then take a look at them to see whether they are sitting nicely in the right kind of light. It's I have found that really useful, that you can actually say to people, do you know what, you're sitting a bit in the darkness there, or you're a bit pulled back, or we'd like everyone to be roughly the same size head in the screen, and you can actually get people to kind of set themselves up nicely. So getting people to come 10 minutes early and popping them in and out of the room before you start can be a really useful way of making sure that everybody is all good and ready to go, and that they haven't got anybody else in the background. And it just gives you a chance to get to know them a tiny little bit individually as well. So I would counsel for just doing that little tech check before you start the group. I personally would also say that I have found over time not to have large numbers of people in a group if I want to have a conversation. So I'm really interested to hear other people, but I really like trios now because I still feel like there's a conversational gel, but there's not too many people, maybe 4 or 5 people. So I'll shut up there, and Annabelle's got her hand up, so you go, Annabelle, and then anybody else who wants to come in.
So I was gonna ask everyone a question, but prior to that one, and I would say I'm absolutely with you. In fact, I like shorter, smaller. So I'm often doing quads now, and I'm like, yeah, trios or quads, and preferably for an hour. Just, you know,
Yeah.
just unless it's something that's a bit more in depth and trying to understand sort of behavior, but especially testing and things that people just, it's really difficult to keep your own enthusiasm going, let alone theirs.
Right, so concentration levels, it feels like
Yeah.
it's for an hour. Brilliant, thank you.
But can I just quickly ask a question as well?
Of course.
So I'm just quite interested because there was one area. So normally I'm quite bullshit and I will say what I think and I will ask, you know, tell people what. But there was one thing where I just feel like I just feel like I'm being a bit pernickety and I feel a bit embarrassed asking them in front of other people. But do you know when people are on a Zoom call and they're like, maybe it's not really inappropriate, but it feels a bit inappropriate. Like something like if they're lying on their bed and like, I don't know, like all this sort of stuff. Like, and you just think, oh, I don't want to say this in front of other people, but I don't really like this. I don't. Do you know, like, does anyone else do anything about that, or do you just let it go?
Really great question. So anyone want to chip in there? I've got my own views on that, but anyone else want to chip in? Clara, have you got your hat? Did you put your hand?
Yes, yeah, I put my hand up for two things. I also prefer to have smaller groups, definitely smaller and shorter. And what I've added recently, and in Italy it worked, with Italian it works. I haven't tried it with the French or other nationalities, but I leave the opportunity to get in touch again. If the theme areas we're discussing is involving and interesting and important, to just come back to me to add by email, just adding a few more comments or thinkings. And sometimes it worked really, really, really well. And I didn't expect that, but I just threw the possibility, and they were accepting it, and I got a few more integrations. And as far as the context and the posture, and I'm a little bit strict on that because I don't accept it. I don't accept such a difference. It's almost part of the tech check if you want to. It's like okay, if you want to sit on a couch, that's fine, but not really just doing as if you were, you know, on your own. And it's like the young people tend to do that. You must let them freer in the way they sit down, etc. But adult and normal people, more mature people, definitely I would not like that. I mean, it's really, it's distracting. It's like I don't like it.
Interesting. Thank you, Clara. Graham, do you want to comment on Annabelle's question, or did you want to say
on both things? First thing to say is, frankly, I'm not particularly fussed. I do find quite a few people do lie on their bed, which I'm always rather surprised at. But provided they're fully clothed, I don't view that as a problem. You know, one of the great advantages of Zoom is that people are in their own environment and they're comfortable. And provided people are on a suitable screen, then actually I'm not particularly fussed about that. But back to the point about how many people in a group, I run all my sessions down with 4 people. Sometimes the clients don't get it, and I'll at a push run with 5. But I typically find it takes about somewhere between 30 and 50% longer to get through the same amount of material.
Agreed.
Just because you don't have the same fluidity of interaction that you do face to face. I actually don't think that impairs significantly the quality of the feedback, to be perfectly honest with you. Over the last 3 years, I really don't feel it's significantly impaired the feedback. And actually, I run groups just as long as I always have done. So typically for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And now I would say this, wouldn't I, because I'm such a brilliant moderator, but I do find that actually they're as interested as they ever were in a group discussion.
Great.
You know, face to face.
Alison.
If you can keep them engaged, they'll stay engaged, whether it's online or whether it's in person for a similar amount of time, is my experience.
Thank you. Alison.
Yeah, I think we've got a few different threads going on what we're talking about, but I was going to come back to the point about group size that you were making. And yes, I think ideally smaller groups are great, but I would say I mean, again, a parallel with sort of the corporate training world I work in, and doing so much now on Zoom and Teams. And I find using the interactive tools like Mentimeter really does keep people engaged.
Right.
And I've got one up on my, I'm sure everybody knows what I mean, but otherwise I've got an
Show us.
example. Is that okay? I mean, just
Brilliant.
the training I was doing now, and I had people based in Kenya, in Singapore, US, France, etc. And sorry, that was not this screen. Let me just share the other bad example. My apologies. Screen 2. So yes, just can you see that now? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just throwing out a question. What are your associations? It says 43 responses. That's because each person could write up to 5 answers. There were about 12 in the group. But, you know, very quickly getting in something from the group there to get their feedback. And then, of course, you can follow up on it as well. And I did, you know, sort of other activities with them as well. And I just think that that kind of thing can really you know,
Yes.
really get them engaged very quickly, and not that it's quantitative research, but just something like this, you know, using bar charts. So you just kind of like very quickly get an overview of it and say, oh, that's interesting. It seems, you know, some of you are thinking this. Who would mind sharing what you thought about that? So I find that you can have, yeah, you can have maybe up to sort of 6-8 people and still have them quite engaged by using, but you need to really keep them, you know, different tools going all the time. I do some throw out questions, some chat box exercises, some Mentimeter, some breakout rooms. And yeah, I don't think in a large group you can just throw out questions and have people answer so easily as you would if they were
You're
sitting
changing
around
the
you.
pacing and the activity.
Yeah, the medium, the pace, and exactly. Sometimes they're all contributing, sometimes just, you know, one, and get them to comment on each other. So, and I mean, that's just a couple of the tools in Mentimeter, right? There's many things we can do, and lots of other tools too.
And of course, we've got, like, you could go off in pairs, you could come back, like there's so much that you can do that's different if we want to. Anita.
Yeah, just very quickly going back, because you mentioned, oh, you go into the waiting room and check them out beforehand, like do a little tech check. And this is something I have some clients who insist that we do groups via webinar rather than the normal Zoom meeting. Actually, it's only one client who really insists, and she likes to have the clients on one side and the respondents on the other side. And this is really difficult for moderating because you have absolutely zero control of when people are coming in. So, for example, if a client asks you to recruit 6 for 4, I'd end up with 6 in the group, and I'd feel far too, you know, how do you get rid of someone when they're already in the group? Whereas the meeting format is much better for that, because you leave people in the waiting room, you check them out one by one, a very quick tech check, you know that they've met the recruitment criteria, and then if you have to leave 2 out, you can just send them a note and let them know that the recruiter will call them. So that's it really. That I think it's better the meeting format rather than the webinar format.
Great, that's really good advice. Lynn.
Yeah, hi. Well, a couple of things. I mean, firstly, I would agree that I tend to stick to quads. Occasionally, if I'm pushed to 5 by a client, but tend to stick to quads, as I just get no extra value really by adding on more than that. So I would agree with the point a lot of people have made on that. The other thing I was going to say was Annabelle's question about inappropriately dressed. Wasn't so much that. I had this guy in a recent group who started walking around, and he would pick up his laptop, he would move and sit down, and I would think, that's it, great. And then 5 minutes later, he would do it again. And it becomes a little bit awkward in terms of, it's particularly because it is a small group. And I just wondered if anybody had, you know, I didn't deal with it during that group. He did start sitting down for longer, but I could see the others were a little bit distracted, as was I when he started doing this. And he was an older guy, you know, and well, not young, shall we say. So it was difficult. It was going to be awkward to say something to him, and I thought I need to think about this for next time.
Yeah, well, that's really helpful, Lynn, because it sounds to me like we almost need a list of expectations about how we want people to behave, and we tell them that up front, even at the recruitment stage. Like I personally have no problem with people in their onesies lying on their bed, but I do think if that is going to be an issue, we just need to tell people up front, and then they can decide to join. And it's perfectly reasonable to say, don't do that because we're in a meeting. You know, that's absolutely fine as well. So thank you, Mary.
Yeah, a kind of counterpoint to what Lynn was just saying. I've had examples of where, usually obviously in an IDI rather than in a group, where somebody's spontaneously stood up and gone and got something or shown me something in their house, which has been really insightful, which would never have happened in a traditional focus group. And it's really added, and I've kind of screenshotted something with their permission, obviously, but it's really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really useful to know that if you're in somebody's home and if you're doing a depth, you've got potentially the whole of the house. And on that note, also for a depth interview, if they need to take a break, they're at home. If you're talking about a sensitive subject and you're feeling like it's getting difficult, you can turn the cameras off. You can have a break, can't you? You can do flexible things in a way, I think, that we couldn't have necessarily done before if somebody had to go to somebody's house, and like we can play around with the format. Maria.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I was wondering what I was going to say. A couple of things. I suppose the thing about posture and how they're behaving, it's a really tricky pancake, especially when you've got a load of clients who are on the WhatsApp sidebar constantly commenting on everybody. I have had couple of times quite difficult situations whereby the person was on a they were sitting sort of to the side, they were like this, and with their face to the side, and I had a strong feeling that they were working on another screen and partly attending, and I did on both occasions challenge them, once because the client was kicking off, and it is very difficult because how do you do that? You don't want to be like a teacher and tell them off. So I sort of tried to do a kind of a oh, is everything okay? Are you I feel like, and quite often they're defensive, and it's like, well, feels like you're not really paying attention, you're not facing the screen. And then the one time, both times, they just didn't change their behavior at all, and it was actually very difficult because one was obviously typing, doing something else. So I don't know how to get around that other than just turf them out. The other thing I would say was I was gratified to hear that, I can't remember who it was now, so sorry, about the difference between webinar and meeting, because I once was made to use webinar. What a nightmare. I had people, this thing about control, I had people, it was 4 to recruit 6, and I had all 6 turn up, and then some of them were obviously not suitable because of various reasons, and so I selected my 4, but then, and I sort of said to them, oh, you're subject to requirements, but they still came in the blinking meeting. So they were like, there was pinging in and out, and I was trying to get rid of them, and it was just awful. So I definitely concur that meeting is so much better from that regard. So just going back to, in terms of the etiquette about managing people, if they're lying on the bed, that's fine, so long as they're alert and participating. I don't really care what they're doing or how they're sitting, so long as they're facing the screen and are part of it. But it is quite common that you can, everything's kicking off in the background, or they're just not paying attention, and that's really frustrating. I don't know how you get around that other than say, hello, are you with us?
I think also saying this is difficult for me, and I'm trying to like bring them into your world a bit,
Yeah,
so they can understand, you know, that what your thing is. John.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Sorry, I showed up a bit late. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on the etiquette thing, because I've had obviously since the pandemic we're doing mostly online sessions, and we've come across, it's very occasional. I mean, most of the time people behave, but when it doesn't happen, then I think I always try and play with a bit of humor. If it really becomes a bit irritating, I make a sort of smart comment saying, hey, you comfortable there? You all right? Hope you're not going to fall asleep, type of thing, so that they realize that there's something a bit awkward in their position. And I find that usually that, you know, they react, and usually other respondents agree as well that there's something wrong, or should I say, with that person's behavior. So you kind of, in the same way you'd have someone in a face-to-face group where you'd you could tell that they're, you know, pick out their phone and they start looking at their phone while in the group. So you sort of say, well, you know, please, we've asked you that that, you know, you concentrate during the session, please. And so I think it's just a question of telling them, but ideally with a bit of humor, hinting towards it, and then gradually stepping up and saying, well, you know, this is a bit bothersome because I can tell that you're not really engaged and you're distracting us and what have you. As you said, you might be, it might not be easy for me because I don't know if you're in or you're out, and that kind of stuff. So, but luckily it's pretty rare. And the other thing about the meeting size, I've done groups all sizes, to be honest, but I do tend to prefer you know, 4 or 5 ideally, because I think people are more engaged. They can see each other much more than if there's a group of 10 where there's just, they become little images on the screen. It's much more difficult for them to jump in, and there's less of a group dynamic. And I wanted to say something on that front about the onboarding people. I find that you can lose a lot of time, especially in France, where people don't show up that early. Even if you ask them to come early, you say it's 6 o'clock, can you come here early? And there will always be 1 or 2 that will be there early, but a lot of people will be there just at 6 or even a bit late. So if you start bumping into technical problems, then it becomes a bit of a nuisance. So I usually bring in someone to help me host, and basically handles the sort of the welcome, does a tech check, or maybe even calls anyone who's late for me, so it avoids me losing any time and doing several things at the same time. So that usually is helpful. Ideally, the recruiter or someone on his or her team, and they only need to be there for a few minutes. But you know, you do have people who have these huge technical problems even nowadays, and there's that you could lose lots and lots of precious time trying to sort it out for them. So
and
yeah,
distracting you at the moment when you're trying to get ready.
Help you along with this onboarding for maybe half an hour maximum, a bit before up to the first 15 minutes of the session. I find that very valuable.
Great stuff, John. Thank you. Graham, and then we're going to go on to pitfalls and problem shooting. So Graham, last word for you.
Just quickly to agree with John and the idea of having a co-host for the first sort of 10 or 15 minutes, just to sort out, you know, who you're going to have, who you're not going to have, and so on and so on. Another thing that occurs to me that one should brief participants on beforehand is, on a couple of occasions I've had people, when we're talking about a brand or something like that, they've said, oh, I've just been on the internet and I've just found so and so and so and so. Oh my God, you know, Jesus, that's what I absolutely don't need to happen.
Yeah.
So it's reminded me to actually put that into part of my participant briefing, is do not go on the internet and search things while we're having a discussion. The final thing, which we may be coming back to, is clients viewing, because somebody mentioned all the client chat on WhatsApp or whatever in parallel. I just do not have that. Because actually, as important as briefing the participants is briefing the clients, because they have to behave as well. So we may be coming back to that. So I'll leave it there.
Well, actually, I hadn't thought about that, but I love that topic so much that I would like us to talk about that, like client handling. Yeah, one thing I wanted to give out as a piece of advice is I have started saying to clients, please let me do the first group, the first session without you, so that I can wrap my head around it. And honestly, because I think they know I'm quite a confident character, confident moderator, they will allow that, if that makes sense. So sometimes they are human beings, aren't they? They do get that we're trying to kind of get our head into the game, and that has worked quite well for me, just by saying to them, please don't come to this one. I'll send you the recording, but just let me do this first one without you. Annabelle. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, or sometimes when I'm working really closely with some of my clients, like they know that we deal, the first one is a pilot. So we'll often have one instead of two if we've got time, and it's a pilot, and they are going to collectively, then we'll have a chat the next morning or straight afterwards, and we'll say what worked, what didn't work, what are we going to cut out, and and we'll refine it and work on it together. Or yeah, they can't be there if I don't know them that well, or they don't have that kind of working relationship, then yeah, they have to just just come in later. But I always give them a briefing. I like a briefing doc. I have a briefing document that I always give them. This is what you're allowed to do, this is what you're not allowed to do. And we always have a set agreement as well. If you've got questions, this is how you're going to do it. If you don't, then so we have a set agreement depending on the project and how difficult and complex the project is, and whether how much I can handle sort of questions of WhatsApp at the same time, or whether it's going to be like a lot of just getting stuff together. And also an agreement as about whether they can turn the camera on at the end and ask a question or two, because actually that can work really well, I think, as well. Like, it depends again on the project, but sometimes the participants really like it as well, and then they get a chance to see it, and it sort of takes the mystique out of that black box, and it kind of, so actually that can work really well, I think.
Do you ever get pushback from clients about that agreement?
They're not allowed to push back. It's non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. Loving it. Alan.
Oh, Alan.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, no, I put my hand up and down because Annabelle said nearly everything that I was going to say.
Right.
Definite checklist that goes to the client. The other thing that I've done recently is get the client on half an hour before the start of the group, so that you can change their names and close their identity off, give them a little bit of a briefing. And then the other thing that I think has been really helpful when I've got some kind of technical subject matter, that any kind of questions from respondents that I really don't know the answers to, I will park, and we have a Q&A about 20 minutes before the end of the group. So we can just deal with those and then almost kind of wrap up in the last 10 minutes or so and summarize.
Great. I always try to introduce the client to my participants, and then ask the clients to go off camera and then hide off camera people, with the idea that they know that there are people watching them, but then they don't get distracted. So I'm just wondering whether anybody else does different stuff, but we'll come back to that. We'll do Sarah first and then maybe come back to answer my questions. So Sarah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I've actually recently come from client side, so I've been that annoying client wanting to watch the groups, and I always, kind of contrary to what everyone's saying about having the first one, I always wanted to be on the first one, because I felt like then you can get all your questions and however it goes, but I would always treat it as a pilot. So I think if you set it up with a client as this is a pilot, then I think it can work quite well, because you get that feedback for the next groups. And I also definitely think it worked better coming off camera at the end to ask any questions than chatting, because I always felt like if I send people questions and everyone's messaging, it just completely ruins the flow. And the same if I was running a group and other people in my team were asking questions, I think it just messes up with the flow, and you're trying to listen to what the participants are saying and what the client's saying and what everyone wants to know. But I also think that can be avoided a lot with really good briefing. If you know what the key questions are and you know what they're trying to get to and which topics are more interesting, then you can avoid a lot of that anyway.
Great stuff. Thank you. Jeff, hello.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that on international work, I always want the client on the first one, and that I want to do it in the UK first, because there's more difficulties when you go to work internationally with other languages. So
That makes sense. So you want to know the client's seen it, approved it, that it's kind of like become the stamp of where you're going, or any alterations that
or the iteration of it.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Great.
And I just wanted to say one other thing while I have the floor.
Yeah, of course.
That we tend to come at it from doing a quant survey first, so we know a lot of the information and profile of the people and their attitudes. So we like to tag our participants and select them on the basis of that. So we do know sometimes in the group, we can say, oh, in your diary or in the quant, you said, just can I pick up on that? So we just had one on hydration where we knew that some people had worked shifts. So we had to do the work at a different time for them. And we had to find out what time were they better, when they'd come off shift at the end of it or at the beginning in the morning. And it was really important to have the background from the quant to then select who we wanted. 5 for 4, by the way.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. We're kind of out of time because we said we'd run this for 45 minutes. So I would just say let's carry on, and if you need to go, there's absolutely no problem, and we'll go for another 5 to 10 minutes. But has anybody got a burning question that they feel like the hive mind might be able to solve? So Annabelle came up with a great one about kind of people, you know, slobbing out in their bedrooms. I had somebody going for a wee once whilst I was doing a depth interview with them, and I could hear the tinkle, which was not my most fun thing. So has anybody else got a burning problem?
Doing worse.
Yeah, I've got one, confidential information. So a lot of what we do is at the early stage, so before it's gone to market. So we tend not to be saying who the client is.
Yeah.
Okay. But as a result, sometimes we have to be really careful in the permissions about what they agree not to talk about and share and stuff. So if you're doing anything like that, HT Face has a watermark protection. Nobody can screen grab or take a picture of anything.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Great. Any problem shooting before we go?
Yeah, I just have one question and just a thought about things like traditional groups where we do things like pre-tasking. Interested to get people's experiences about, you know, having people prepare for online groups with pre-task exercises, and if there's any sort of learnings around that.
And Clara's got her hand up.
Because I tend to do a lot with pre-tasking, in fact, and that's where the problem is, because pre-tasking can be easy if people are used to, for example, if it concerns images or words or things like that, you must have a good command of all the technical stuff. So they tend to sharing with the rest of the group. It's an issue, but this can be solved by you know, by all the previous information that you get, and you give the respondents, etc. I think that the pre-tasking can be used in a very nice way. I did it with music. I do a lot with images, words and definitions, and work on language. I need to really work on language nuances, which are so important for certain studies. So the pre-tasking, I ask to get all the elements beforehand. And if I have questions, I just individually. So it becomes a different way of handling the final discussion group or the final group that we will be having. It's more like an individual approach, so that we make clear that everything works and it's in order what they are going to present. Maybe just the day before, not earlier than that, and then it can be shared in the groups. But it's a different approach. Like with pre-tasking, it was much easier when we could do it in person. It's a little bit more complicated, but I would not miss the opportunity of doing that. The only thing where I still don't have the solution is when I need to do sniff test, taste test, and other things that have to do with sensory. I really need to find a creative approach. And also, I remember one Saturday I was interviewing people in the United States from France, in the United States, and it was about hair dyeing. And the problem is that they received the sniff test, everything that they had to do, and the product to put on the hair, etc. And there are so many different ways you can sniff anything that you can sniff, must sniff for the group, that it really requires even more cautions, because one lady sniffed so deeply the very first sample that she couldn't evaluate all the following.
Clara, I'm doing a product evaluation test at the moment.
Okay,
yeah, and what we're doing with it is that we are giving a Zoom briefing to everybody before they get the stuff. So and so you set the parameters of what you're expecting the behavior to be, and we also have a video for them to watch as well. So I don't know whether that helps. I would say on the pre-task, I think they work better now because you can share stuff with people. As long as it's not confidential, you can create a PowerPoint document of stuff that they've sent to you, and then you can screen share and get their reaction to it. So actually, sometimes it can work a lot better.
Yeah.
Jeff, you've got your hand up. And you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yes, the dogs were barking. I had to get rid of them. Just to say that on some of the pre-task is really important for engagement, I found, so that people stick. And the other thing that we tend to say to them before the group or the community or whatever is to say that towards the end, we're going to ask you for your view on what the client should do. And everyone who gives us a good answer is getting an extra £10 incentive.
Okay, interesting.
As a result, they stay engaged till the end of it, whether it's a 2 hour or a 1 hour or whatever.
Okay.
But spot prizes as well make a huge impact, because someone thinking, oh, I've done that pre-stage, I've done that, I'm earning £100, and suddenly at the end they've got £130, they're really happy.
Okay, great stuff, thank you. Annabelle.
Yeah, no, I do the spot prizes as well, but most just on the pre-task, it definitely gets you. I mean, pre-task. The thing is with the pre-task, what I was going to say is it can be hit and miss what you get for it. But I find that with the Zoom, it takes the warm-up stuff takes so much longer that I tend to use the pre-task instead of a warm-up. And whereas I think before, when we do more face-to-face, I'd like to see their reaction to the subject when we're sitting in the room. Well, that's kind of gone out the window now, really. Now that I'll let them come pre-warmed up to the topic and ready to chat. And I definitely agree that it's more of an engagement mechanism as well. It really gets them more engaged, and they kind of feel like they've already invested in something, so they're more likely to show up. But what I would say is, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you send out. You get every single format coming back. I mean, you just have to go with it. So you can send out a PowerPoint presentation for them to fill in, or a Word document for them to fill in, and you will end up getting pictures back, text notes back, WhatsApps back, emails back. I mean, just whatever they manage.
It's their world, isn't it?
Yeah, just whatever. We're never going to get the right thing that's going to be totally easy for everybody, and we're never going to get the same thing back from everyone. You just have to go with the content and not with the format.
Annabelle, you told me, we were talking about Nightmare, and you were telling me once you had recorded something but it hadn't recorded.
Yeah.
And so I also, just as a pitfall thing, I wondered whether people had had recording problems, and whether just getting out the old dictaphone and putting the dictaphone on also is, I know might be belt and braces, but just in case. So I kind of wanted to get that in there. Don't assume that it will always download, always record, because that one critical one might not. Alan, you've got your hand up.
Just I think there's many different forms of pre-tasking. Couple of things that just to share that have worked for us. You know, Annabelle was talking about, you get a variety of formats back, give them a task, and then get them to video on WhatsApp and give a commentary. So what you've got is a lot of sound bite to use in your analysis or your debrief. If the pre-task is not fundamental to the subject matter, but you want it almost like an icebreaker, you know, make it fun and do it in a non-digital format. Just give them a task to think about, and then start with that as part of the group. You know, yeah, I'm not going to go into examples of things we've used because you've probably got better ones than I have. But you know, interpreting the brand using the art form of dance can be fun on Zoom. I'll just throw that one in as a have you tried it? I'd love to do that. I'd love to have the kind of Reeves and Mortimer style of pre-task, just to see what people do.
Fabulous, thank you. Anything, I think we need to wrap up, but anyone want to say any final words? Anything at all, as long as they're not going to go for a wee whilst they're saying them, I'm, you know, all good. Whoops, sorry. Anybody at all? Oh, sorry, Barry, I'll call you back in a sec. Sorry, sorry everybody. I thought I'd put him out and I'd actually... Sorry, that's me now on camera saying that forever. So anybody want anything else? What I think we can do is we could keep a little conversation going on the e-group if we wanted to. So if anyone wants to on the e-group, pose another thought after this. This is using Clara's brilliant idea. Anything that springs to mind afterwards, pop it on the e-group and we can all carry on talking. So I found this really helpful. I'm never going to let my clients use the webinar version. I'm going to use the tech that's been suggested to me. I'm going to mix things up a little bit more than normal. I'm definitely going to stick to my guns with the clients and start getting them to follow my agreements. Love it, love it, love it. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you.
It's been a really brilliant session.
Lovely to see you all as well. Really enjoyable.
And on your behalf, can I say thanks very much to Kath for giving up her time and leading this really interesting discussion. And yeah, do track on the e-group. And thank you for supporting the knowledge share.
Yeah, and Lynn, thank you for doing the knowledge shares as well. They've been really invaluable. So
if any of you have any topics that you'd like to share with us for a future one, then please let me know via you know my address.
Brilliant.
And someone's just decided they want to join us. It's probably a little bit late.
Yeah, don't let them in. All right, thanks so much. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.